welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South. Tension continues to mount in Guyana as the country still awaits the result of Monday's general election. In the latest development, the opposition PPP party has filed an injunction against the Guyana's Elections Commission, preventing them from declaring the election result unless done in compliance with the law. But reports state that while the injunction was issued, it has not been delivered because the GECOM chairwoman has been locked in a room guarded by 2 security guards. Earlier in the day, angry exchanges outside the election offices took place after the final verification of votes was halted overnight. Let's go live to Georgetown to our correspondent Alejandro Kirik, who is being joined by Sirfan Ali, the presidential candidate for the PPP party. Hi, Alejandro.
Hi, Estefania. Yes, we're here. We have been witness to what looks like a blatant rigging of the election. But for that, we have this candidate, Irfan Ali, the presidential candidate who claims to have won this election by 18,000 votes, and which, you know, the PPP is challenging the ABNU and the GECOM's position on this. Mr. Ali, thank you very much for talking to us. What's your assessment of this situation?
Well, as you're aware, this has been a complicated few days. We have been waiting for the declaration of Region 4. For that declaration to take place, there's a verification process of the results. Over the last 3 days, we have been coming for this verification process, and it has been delayed and stopped, delayed and stopped. And today, the RO came, the returning officer came down with a sheet of paper and said he's ready to declare the result. Everyone in the room objected, and he then proceeded back to his office, and standing on the top of a stairway, we saw him standing there, and then we heard that he declared the result for that region, and they inflated their numbers. They inflated their numbers. The SOPs, the statement of polls, are there to verify this. They refused to use the SOPs in the inputting of the results. All the other parties who have contested these elections, the small parties, have all agreed that the People's Progressive Party Civic has won these elections. So it's a very sad day for democracy. This is a coup, basically, and we are hoping that the international community, the observers, will come out strongly on this matter.
And the Secretary General of the PPP, Mr. Jack Deo, says that the chair of the Electoral Commission is being kidnapped upstairs, forcing her to go along with this.
Well, yeah, exactly. The law provides that we have to, if we have to challenge it, court order was sought. We have to serve that court order. We're trying to serve that court order for the last couple of hours. The chair of the commission has locked herself in a room, or she's locked in a room, and we cannot get to serve those orders.
And your party will challenge this also on the streets with your supporters, or just a judicial or legal challenge?
As it is now, we are going to the party headquarters, and we'll have to decide on the full course forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ali.
Thank you.
Well, that was the presidential candidate of the PPP, what looks like the winner of this election.
Alejandro, we thank you so much for that important update. We'll be speaking to you throughout the day. Moving on, March 5th marks 7 years since the passing of leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, former President Hugo Chavez Frias. The date is commemorated by a ceremony at the 4F Mountain Barracks, where Chavez is laid to rest. At exactly 4:25 p.m., a customary gun salute marks the moment that Hugo Chavez passed away.
What's most shocking is that 7 years have passed. 7 years without Commander Hugo Chavez, a man who left us so many teachings. Many of us remember him with happiness, with poems, with music. And well, we will always remember Hugo Chavez as a leader that transformed politics in Venezuela. We, the soldiers, continue pursuing his legacy. Because if there's anyone who set an example and was an authentic military leader, it was Hugo Chavez. He left us so many teachings, from our principles and the Bolivarian values. We started to give real value to our country thanks to him. A country full of poverty and inequality, Hugo Chavez was a military leader who became a regional and then a worldwide leader. Today we remember him, like always. His teachings remain in our hearts and in our souls. We will continue to defend his legacy. 7 years is nothing for what's coming, for what Chavismo has for the future.
In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, students of the St. Vincent Grammar School, Girls High School, Bishop's College, and other secondary schools are reading about Chavez to commemorate his passing. Students read Cuentos del Arañero in the first Spanish reading aloud competition. Nicaraguans took to the Avenida de Bolivia Chavez, led by Sandinista youth, as a tribute to the Venezuelan revolutionary leader. A Venezuelan delegation joined the youth in honoring Chavez for the legacy which he left the people of the Global South. They presented followers at the Hugo Chavez roundabout monument. Let's take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Police in Bolivia have used tear gas against protesters in El Alto. The community was protesting against a session of the Senate being held, which marked the 35th anniversary of the city of El Alto, with the presence of the far-right Senator Oscar Ortiz. Children were among those caught in the repression in the Sencata district, near the site of a massacre carried out by the Janine Áñez de facto government on November 19th. Bolivia's de facto government is using state funds to help with the campaign of President Janine Áñez, mere days before the implementation of a decree which would specifically forbid such acts.
The de facto government is using state resources to finance their own presidential campaign, as they have also branded aid given to families in need after natural disasters with their campaign slogan. This was brought to light by the right-wing Citizen Community Party, which is one of the 7 right-wing parties bidding for the presidency.
Donations delivered in Tiquipaya are branded with the logo of the Together Alliance. They have printed the image of candidate Áñez in calendars given to people. They are taking advantage of their position and of official acts to carry out their presidential campaign.
The use of state funds for this campaign was revealed just a day before a decree pushed for by the same de facto authorities was approved, as part of their campaign, no less, which would specifically forbid such actions.
There is a Supreme Decree that establishes the use of state funds in line with the Constitution. We will have to investigate and warn about the cases in which this was done and issue sanctions accordingly. We must respect the Supreme Decree.
The use of state resources for electoral campaigns is forbidden by the Constitution and by electoral law. But the Supreme Electoral Court has said they will take no action unless an official complaint is made.
The Supreme Electoral Court will analyze any complaints about the ongoing presidential campaigns.
The Bolivian right wing has failed to fulfill its promise of a unified candidacy to face off against the movement towards Socialism Party, which was the victim of a military-backed coup last November. At the moment, there are 7 right-wing candidates in the running, 6 of which have condemned the de facto president for joining the race, after initially saying it would be dishonest if she did.
Venezuela's government has presented evidence that the Venezuelan opposition orchestrated yet another false flag operation. Minister of Communication Jorge Rodriguez presented a recorded video confession of a convicted criminal who admitted to being paid $200 and who was promised an additional $200 to cause a scare and intimidate the crowd of opposition figures and supporters.
This is a photograph. Guaidó is standing there, and there a gunman appears. The man comes up from his motorcycle. He mimics pointing to Guaidó, but all of the other people are calm, as if nothing is happening. Another curious detail is that in the year 2020, in the 21st century, there is only one photograph at this time, when everyone has a smartphone, which they could use to take photos and video from different angles.
En este siglo XXI es que solamente hay una fotografía, pero resulta que la agencia AP
It turns out that AP agency says the Associated Press wasn't present at the rally and couldn't verify the information provided by the lawmakers. The photo of the gunman was sent to the Associated Press by a team of the opposition leader. They constructed the photo, sent it to AP, but the agency has not investigated the circumstances. I challenge you to the Associated Press. Look at this photography. Publish the testimony of Climaco Eric Medina and publish the truth of what took place. I challenge all the rest of the foreign press agencies, duly accredited in Venezuela, to the media which attacks Venezuela on a daily basis. At the very least, in this instance, retract what you published.
The president of the National Constituent Assembly of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, who hosts the popular Wednesday night program Con el Mazo Dando, took to the show to dismantle the stunt.
A resident of Lara State has confessed to taking part in a false flag operation, which was orchestrated by the Venezuelan opposition on February 29th. It was on that day that Juan Guaido and some of his entourage held a small march of reportedly 250 people in Barquisimeto.
My name is Climaco Medina. On Friday the 28th of February, a motorcyclist came to me. When I went to look at him, I recognized him, who they called Chicho, and he told me that tomorrow Guaido will be coming and they were looking for a motorcyclist to do a job. So I said, well, yes. So he told me that I need to be in La Gallera, La Paz, at 10 in the morning.
Guaido's team had publicized a video showing one of their white SUVs covered in bullet holes. They reported that a black-clad man with his face covered and on a motorcycle had pulled out a gun and threatened the group of opposition leaders and supporters.
He took out a revolver and gave it to me. He told me that I had to point it at the people and intimidate them and aim at Guaido.
Meanwhile, news spread that a young man at the opposition rally was shot and sent to hospital. What was dubbed an attack and an attempt on Guaido's life was denounced by both national media and opposition backers in the United States. The Associated Press published a photo of the man who Guaido claimed threatened him. But AP themselves said that they were not present at the rally and that the photo was provided to the Associated Press by the opposition figure's team. The supposed assailant in black was labeled a Colectivo member and a socialist hardliner. The man in black was arrested by intelligence agents. Alias El Caracas gave an account that the entire episode had been planned and that he had been paid to stage an assault on the crowd.
He took out $200, gave it to me, and he said that when I finished the job, he was going to give me $200 more. Around Calle 10, between Calle 10 and 12, I took out the gun, pointed it at the people. The people began to shout, run in different directions. I continued walking, pointing at Guaido. They began taking photos, and I returned.
The confession was revealed on the Wednesday night program hosted by President of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello.
The Bolivarian National Guard of Venezuela in Carabobo has managed to stop a number of weapons from entering the country. The discovery took place at the international airport of Valencia on a flight from Bogota, Colombia. The weapons seized include AK-47 rifles and ammunition. In El Salvador, the FMLN party has announced it will present a reconciliation law to protect the victims of the internal conflict. The left-wing party announced it is working with the victims and other sectors in preparing a law that respects the Constitution. It seeks to protect the victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity that were carried out during the country's civil war. Last week, the National Assembly approved a law that was criticized by social movements who called it an amnesty law that seeks to protect war criminals. Peru's Javier Pérez de Cuellar, the only Latin American to become the head of the United Nations, has died at the age of 100. Pérez de Cuellar served 2 terms as UN Secretary General between 1982 and 1991. During that time, he helped set up the Contadora Group to promote peace talks in Central America and accompanied the final peace deal with the FMLN in El Salvador. He later stood for the presidency of Peru, but lost to Alberto Fujimori. We'll be right back. Don't go. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the 2020 Democratic presidential primary following lackluster results on Super Tuesday, including being trounced in her home state. Warren was one of the first candidates to announce a presidential campaign for 2020, pitching herself as the middle ground among Democrats. Now the question is, who will Warren endorse, as the race for the Democratic nomination has come down to 2 men, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former Vice President Joe Biden.
And people are afraid. There are a lot of people out there.
Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders yesterday?
Not today. Not today. I need some space around this, and want to take a little time to think a little more. I've been spending a lot of time right now on the question of suspending and also making sure that this works as best we can for our staff, for our team, for our volunteers.
Following his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib province starting at midnight. The meeting came after more than 30 Turkish soldiers were killed in recent days as Syrian government forces advanced to retake the rebel-controlled area. The fighting in Idlib had also threatened a direct conflict between Turkish and Russian forces, which both leaders are anxious to avoid.
At 001 tonight, as in from midnight on, the ceasefire will be put in place.
And thousands of refugees who have mostly fled the fighting in Syria's Idlib province are still waiting at the Greek border, hoping to be let in. The Greek government said over the last 24 hours, border police prevented nearly 7,000 attempted entries from migrants at the border with Turkey. Meanwhile, political leaders and social organizations in Europe are calling for a more humane approach to the migration crisis. But on Thursday, Turkey deployed thousands of police to prevent Greece pushing migrants back into Turkish territory.
We have been waiting for you. Just give us a permission, please. A permission, for God's sake. For Christ's sake. For Christ's sake. We just need to cross the border peacefully. Peacefully. They are waiting us. Our children, our babies, our mothers, fathers are waiting us. They are in Sweden, in Germany, in Netherlands, in Norway, in the Scandinavian countries. They are waiting us patiently, patiently. They are calling us every day. What's going on?
A court in Scotland has put off until June 18th an extradition hearing for the former Catalan Education Minister Clara Ponsati. She is one of several Catalan leaders in exile who the Spanish authorities want to try for their part in the 2017 independence referendum.
If a politician in Scotland had allowed a referendum to take place to allow people to give their practical expression to their Article 10 rights, whatever the legality of that referendum, it is utterly inconceivable that they would be charged with levying of war against the sovereign or be charged with treason. In a true democracy, people do not get prosecuted for advocating political change by peaceful and constitutional means, nor can we allow Clara Ponsati to be extradited and prosecuted for doing the same thing in Spain. Today is a victory against Spain, who stand accused of abusing the rule of law, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
South Africa has its first confirmed case of the COVID-19 virus. He's a 38-year-old man who had traveled to Italy.
As you have heard already, honorable members, we have already confirmed the first case that has tested positive for the coronavirus or COVID-19 in South Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal. I was informed this morning, I've already briefed the President.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.